exactly is an earthquake?
That's a good question. So I think if you ask anybody what an earthquake is, they'll start off with just like the ground shaking, and that's not incorrect. But it's a little bit more than that, right? Obviously, we feel the ground shake, and that's what our interpretation of an earthquake is, which is pretty correct. But essentially, an earthquake is just the energy that was released during two essential blocks of rock that slipped because of high stresses, right? So the idea here is that you have a fault. A fault is kind of a fracture in the earth, where it's actually moving, right? So these rock are, and you've held a piece of rock. You've seen rock before. It's really brittle. It's hard. And if you were to slide two past each other, it wouldn't slide easily, right? It wouldn't just like glide past each other. There'd be a lot of stress and friction that builds up, right? So essentially, right, you have two giant pieces of rock. I'm talking about a lot massive, right? And these things are trying to move, but at the fault, they're locked, right? Because it's a lot of stress and a lot of friction. So the stress builds up, and eventually that stress exceeds the strength of the rock, and the rock has no choice but to slip, right? And that sudden slip right there releases seismic energy, which is what the earthquake is. So that's the earthquake you feel. Yeah.
And would you say that there's different types of quakes or I mean,
I think all earthquakes are kind of like they're basically the same in regards of the type of waves or the kind of the reaction that happens. So they all release seismic waves, energy, but there's different types of plates and like faults that generate earthquakes. But I think all earthquakes are kind of categorized under the same. Okay. There's some of them might release like different. There's two types of seismic surface waves, but I don't want to get too technical either. But yeah, essentially, in a nutshell, they're pretty much all earthquakes are the same, but there are different sources of earthquakes. Yeah.
And I mean, earthquakes, they can be experienced by everybody across the world, or is this just something for Californians?
No, so earthquakes are in specific locations, right? They don't happen uniformly throughout the world, right? So if you look at like New York, right, there's no earthquakes there. Florida, there's no earthquakes. Kansas, there's no earthquakes. I mean, what do all those states have in common?
It's all on the East Coast.
It's all on the East Coast and the Midwest, right? The Central California. I mean, Central United States. So there's no earthquakes there, and there's a specific reason why there's no earthquakes, and the reason is that the west coast of the United States is actually on an active plate boundary. Okay, when you have active plate boundaries, you have tectonic activity, which ultimately leads to earthquakes, right? On the East Coast, you actually don't have that tectonic boundary. You're actually kind of in the middle of these plates, right? So let me give you a basic geology 101 right here, right? So the Earth's crust is separated into these large tectonic plates. So a good way to kind of visualize this is think of the Earth, and the first layer you're looking at the Earth is made out of Jello. Everybody loves Jello. You know Jello, right? Lime's my favorite Jello, right? Strawberry. You like strawberry? You're a sociopath.
Oh, that's me.
So just imagine this layer of Jello, right? And on top of those Jellos, you have these large plates, which are, we'll call them cookies. Chocolate chip, because chocolate chip is the best. If you oatmeal, that's disgusting. Again, you eat oatmeal raisin cookies, you have issues.
Damn, I'm just a basket case, man.
Yeah. So you imagine this layer of Jello, which is called what we call the asthenosphere, right? And above that, the cookie layers, which is called the lithosphere, right? And these cookie layers are broken in specific areas. When they come together, that's what we call a plate boundary. Okay, and these plate boundaries are the number one source for tectonic activity, including earthquakes. So we have a cookie layer that breaks here in California, that runs right through the spine of California, and that's called the San Andreas Fault.
The San Andreas.
Yeah. Which is my baby. It's where I've spent my last 4 years researching down in the southern section in Palm Springs areas. I have a very complicated relationship with the San Andreas Fault.
And then fun fact, that's San Andreas is Brian's favorite movie.
Oh, fuck no. I hate that movie. That movie is absolute garbage.
I thought it was very accurate, man.
No. You'll lose brain cells watching that movie. Oh, no. You really will, so don't do it. But we could talk about the movie in a little bit.
Yeah. And let's see. As far as earthquakes, is it? Let's see how I can phrase this question. What would you say is more has a bigger impact? Would you say when we refer to the magnitude of the quake, or rather the time. Like, let's say an 8.0 for 30 seconds versus a, I don't know, 5.0 for 5 minutes. I don't know.
Gotcha. So there's a direct like correlation between the magnitude of the earthquake with the time of shaking, or the intensity of shaking. So obviously, the higher the magnitude, right, the bigger the quake, the longer the shaking will last, right?
Gotcha.
So it's not like you can have a magnitude 4 that lasts for 3 minutes,
Okay.
right?
Right.
It has to be a big earthquake to have longer shaking periods. That's basically how it works. So the longer the earthquake, the longer you expect the shaking to happen.
And I think you were talking about earlier.
Earlier, what are you talking about? We're barely meeting for the first time.
I mean like 2 minutes. When I say earlier, I mean like 2 minutes.
Okay.
So it's like an earthquake's like a release of stress, right? In the plates, or
yeah, precisely, faults, yeah,
or in the faults. And so could you say, if we're having multiple little earthquakes that that would reduce the stress from a big one occurring?
That's a good question. I feel like one of the very, very important question. Absolutely. Yeah, that's not true at all. Because there's one thing. The one key thing here is that magnitude is measured in a logarithmic scale, meaning it grows exponentially the higher you go, right? So a basic logarithmic scale is going to start off. If we talk about energy, you're talking about 0 to 10, right? That's the first section, right? And then it's scaling, exponentially. So then you get from 10 to 100, right? And then 100 to 1,000. You see how we're just adding 1 0 at the end, right? 1,000 to 10,000, 10,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to a million, right? So every increment, even though it's the same size, you're increasing exponentially, right? So this magnitude is the same way. So if a magnitude 8 earthquake, you're looking at, and you compare it to a magnitude 3, right? Even though it's an order of 5 magnitudes, and that might not seem like a lot, that's a lot of energy.
Right.
That's you're growing exponentially, right? So, and the number here that we usually throw out for energy is about 30 times more, right? So a magnitude 3 earthquake is going to be 30 times stronger than a magnitude, what did I say, 3?
Yeah, 3.
Than a magnitude 2, right? A magnitude 7 is going to be 30 times stronger than a magnitude 6. Right, so if you're talking about a bunch of magnitude 3s, right, compared to a magnitude 7, you're looking at 30. You're looking at an order of difference of 4, right? 3 compared to 7. So 30, that'd be 30 to the power of 4, which is 30 times 30 times 30 times 30. So 30, times 30 is 900, 27,000. You're looking at over 1 million times more energy, right? So it doesn't work that way. You can't have 1 million smaller earthquakes to reduce that stress. You need to have that big one.
Yeah. And
sorry for all the math.
But that's mind blowing. Thinking of how much power, just incrementing like that.
Yeah, so there's definitely a significant difference from an M6 to an M7.
Yeah. You mean you think 6 and 7 and it's nothing? But
it's nothing. No, it's significant.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And a 7 to 7.5, there's a big difference as well there. Even though it might not sound like one, but there is.
Right. And is there a relationship between earthquakes and volcanoes, or are those two separate things? Like earthquakes, like we're talking about plates, right? But are volcanoes has to do with plates, or is that like with magma?
That's correct. Volcanoes are also associated with tectonic activity, which revolve around plate boundaries. Not all plate boundaries have volcanic activity. There's only specific ones that do, and that's because there's some type of melting going on in the mantle that is resulting in magma being generated and kind of, rising up and creating these volcanoes. But yes, they're definitely associated with boundary plate boundaries, and they're also they also happen concurrently with large earthquakes as well.
And would you say that a volcano eruption triggers an earthquake, or vice versa, an earthquake can trigger a volcano eruption?
So volcanoes, when the magma chamber starts rumbling, you'll have seismic activity happen. You'll have a bunch of earthquakes. Can it trigger a big earthquake? Not that I've seen, and I don't think there's any scientific evidence to back that up. But we know that we can measure the seismic activity in a volcano and see that it's starting to rumble and, potentially explode or, erupt. And then vice versa, earthquakes can't really trigger, not that I've seen, and I don't think there's any real evidence to back that up either. So while they directly happen in the same area, I don't think they really play a role with each other. When there's large earthquakes, because they're not within the same realm.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, is it also possible to, how should I say this? An earthquake can only be natural, or, as far as like let's say a big explosion.
So you're saying, can we generate earthquakes?
Yes. Can we generate earthquakes?
No. Yes and no. Yes, small earthquakes are normal. You can generate them pretty easily. People that mine, dynamite the wall, right? That'll create some seismic activity. You're creating earthquakes. Fracking creates earthquakes. The collapse of the World Trade Center in 2001 created a magnitude 2.3 earthquake when the tower fell. So yeah, earthquakes can be generated, by human activity. But when we're talking about large scale earthquakes, up in the high magnitudes, that's near impossible.
Right. And then something I said, going back to earlier, is there different type of earthquakes? For example, Mexico City sits on a lake bed, so like there's a lot of water, a lot of liquefaction.
Oh, okay. So yeah, those are what we call secondary features. And I'll touch base on that when we're talking about like what to do before, like kind of the preparation of earthquakes and what to expect.
Okay.
I'll definitely touch up on that.
Yeah, definitely.